Good evening, folks. Welcome back to the channel. It is the preview show for the big game on Sunday at Ibrox against Rangers. I've got Chris back with us and Martin as well to look ahead to the game. Guys, it's obviously a monumental occasion, huge in the context of the season. Chris, I'll start with you first, mate. There's been a lot of talk about just how big the game is, how the biggest game in how many years, because of course this is a close title race. How would you answer that question? It's the biggest game in how many years for you? I think there's a lot of hyperbole about it. People seem to forget that almost 2 years to the day we went to Ibrox, only 2 points ahead. Actually went 1-0 down after about 2 minutes, turned it around to win 2-1 and went on to win the title. But is it just the titles that Celtic win that don't count as title races?
I mean, it's probably the biggest derby game since that game, no doubt, right? I mean, we were, like you say, we were a few points ahead, went behind really early. Tom Rodgers then gets the equalising goal, and then obviously we get Cameron Carter-Vickers, who I know we're going to talk about a little bit later, scores the winner, and that ultimately decided that title race. I think it's definitely, if you were to ask any Celtic fan who was being really honest, this is a cannot lose game, right? I don't believe, and I think Brendan Rodgers was doing a fantastic job deflecting that question this morning in the press conference, saying that it's we don't have to win this game. I think he's trying to push the pressure on Rangers in all of his comments actually this morning. But it's a cannot lose game for sure. You know, if you were to ask me, and we'll probably do our predictions at the end, I would take a draw, because then I think based on the post-split fixtures, I would fancy our chances in the run-in. But absolutely, it's a massive game in the context of the season. Rangers obviously have a game in hand that they have to play away to Dundee in midweek. You would expect them to win that game the way that they've been playing, but you know, if we were somehow able to get the win and go 4 points clear, that's massive pressure then on them in going into that game. It's the psychological lift it would give the players. And look, let's be honest, the first 2 games that we played, particularly the first game at Ibrox, everyone had written us off, right? Rangers are back, Rangers are coming, and we went there, we controlled the game, we deserved to win. And then we absolutely deserve to win the 2-1 game going back to December. So, you know, I think Brendan Rodgers thrives in being written off and having his players written off. We've got a full bill of health. Let's get down to business.
Yeah, Martin, we are where we are this season, obviously. Built up that lead the first half of the campaign, and we've had a lot of obviously underwhelming performances. We've dropped a lot of points against the rest of the league, against the so-called lesser teams, the teams that you would usually expect to pick up near maximum points against. But it's in the big games this season, I actually think the team have coped much better.
Yeah, I mean, I think in some of the big European games we've seen a different Celtic who really stepped up. I suppose the disappointing recent big game would have been the Tynecastle one, but you know, there was some extended circumstances in that game with the red card and the missed penalty and just, you know, sequence of events. But generally speaking, we have stepped up in the big games, and our recent form, depending on how far back you go this year, has been a little bit indifferent. There's been a lot of chat about Rangers' form since that defeat to Celtic at the end of the year, and chat about, you know, they've won 10 out of their 11 games, which is admirable. You know, it's to get 30 points out of 33 that was quoted at the press conference with the Rangers manager today is good. We're not miles behind that. You know, we've had a single defeat, and on top of that, 2 draws, albeit 1 game less. But our recent form's good. You know, if you look at the last 5 games, we've had 12 different scorers, 16 goals scored and 12 different scorers. So we've got goals coming from all over the pitch. 16 for and 5 against versus Rangers 14 for and 4 against in the last 5 games. So there's not much to split the team in regards to recent form, both with 4 wins and 1 defeat. But undoubtedly, I mean, it would be remiss of us to acknowledge it. You know, Rangers have appear to have turned a corner since the since the defeat at the end of the year. Having said that, prior to Celtic winning that game, Rangers were on a good run of form as well. So the big question now is, are Rangers good enough to beat Celtic? Their run against us is horrendous. 1 win in the last 9 games. Obviously this year, and I think if we win this game, that would then be three league victories in the first 3 league fixtures of the year, and that's not happened for 20 years. Was one of the stats that was quoted today. So for me, an awful lot of pressure on Rangers, and as Chris alluded to earlier on, I think it's a must win for Rangers, because I genuinely believe if they fail to beat us, then they come to Celtic Park, and I would fancy our chances of the victory in that fixture. So for me, it's a must win for Rangers, more so than a must win for Celtic, and all the pressure's on them. But certainly recent form, not much to split the teams, but just delighted, more so delighted, Paul, with our personnel, and I'm sure we'll come to that. But for me, that's a game changer when you ask me how I'm feeling about going into this game. But recent form, decent on both sides.
Yeah, of course, Chris. That's one of the big headlines coming for that press conference today, that it's the first time in a long time, maybe all season, that Brendan Rodgers has a full squad to pick from. We've obviously missed the likes of Carter-Vickers and Hatate for long spells this season. Callum McGregor's been out for 4 or 5 weeks as well. These are key players through the spine of the Celtic team. And one of the things that jumps out at you when you look at the 2 games against Rangers this season is that Cameron Carter-Vickers hasn't played a minute against Rangers. Neither has Hatate for that token. And going into both of those games, we were huge underdogs. I think going through a Celtic season, you're always looking at the level of performance against the teams week in and week out, and trying to gauge whether that level of performance would be enough to win the big games in Europe, the big games against Rangers. And so often this season that hasn't felt like the case, because the performance level hasn't quite hit the mark against a lot of those teams. But we have stepped up in the first 2 derbies of the season, and it was without the likes of Carter-Vickers and Hatate.
Yeah, look, there's no getting away from it, Paul. Having the spine of your team be available, and let's include Callum McGregor coming back from obviously a 5-6 week absence, and you've got Carter-Vickers, Hatate, McGregor, and Kyogo. That to me is what is going to ultimately dictate the pattern of the game, how we're obviously going to cope with the atmosphere early in the game. McGregor was sublime in the first 25 minutes at Ibrox earlier this year, right? And that Clement has watched that game and will be devising a plan. But what I think could be a pivotal part of the game is Cameron Carter-Vickers' strongest asset, in my opinion, is the speed and the always intent to play the ball forward. And I think that helping us get out at the back, and how fantastic Hatate is at taking the ball under pressure, always looking to drive forward. And, one of the things that really struck a chord with me in Brendan Rodgers' press conference this morning was there was a segment where he spoke about how Kyogo is always making those forward runs. But if the players are not paying attention to those runs and either feeling like they can make the pass technically, or actually attempting to make the pass, he'll stop making them. And I think if you go back and watch a number of the games we've played this year, that has been a significant drop-off from the teams that Postecoglou, where Kyogo was absolutely lethal. I'm not saying Hatate is the only reason that we'll be able to hopefully penetrate behind Rangers' back 4. But if he is afforded the time and the space, because Rangers are going to gamble to double up on McGregor, that is a dangerous gamble to play with a player like Hatate. If we can get 60, 65 minutes out of McGregor and Hatate and be in a favourable position, we also have the depth coming off the bench because we have a fully healthy squad for the first time all season. So all the attributes are there for us to go and be competitive and lay a massive marker down with 6 games to go after the derby this weekend.
Yeah, Martin, obviously it's huge for us to have these types of players back, and we've talked all season about Carter-Vickers and his importance to the team. You see it even last weekend again. He just brings such a level of assurance to the players round about him. I think that even the forward players, the midfield players, they're a lot more confident when Carter-Vickers is in the team. And watching the last derby back from the end of the year there, Rangers did have chances in the game, and they actually had 2 or 3 chances from long balls over the top. There was one that came directly from a Jack Butland kick out, actually, and it was like a mix-up between Nawrocki and Scales, and Greg Taylor was sort of out of position. Those situations where Celtic are vulnerable in behind happen much less frequently when Carter-Vickers is on the pitch, don't they?
I mean, you study the teams in the last 2 derby games. So the 1-0 at Ibrox, we had Lagerbielke, didn't we, in defence, we had Turnbull in midfield. We had Abada. I'm not going to decry Abada because what a fantastic player he was, but we had Abada out wide. In the most recent game, we had Welsh at the back, Bernardo in the middle, and Palmer out wide. So those 3, in actually almost identical positions in both those games, those players are going to be replaced by Carter-Vickers, Hatate, and it's likely to be Kuhn, isn't it? Which I know it's still early days in Kuhn's career at Celtic, but he's had a really, really good start, and we've seen a big difference in him in recent weeks. He's getting goals, he's getting assists. I mean, Chris has said this already, and you've touched on it as well. No Carter-Vickers, no Hatate in the last 2 games. For me, our best 5 players by a country mile. I don't even think they're necessarily up for debate. Very few people would disagree. Carter-Vickers number 1, Hatate number 2, McGregor number 3, Kyogo number 4. Maybe the 5th one's a bit contentious, but O'Reilly number 5 for me. So to be missing your best player and your second best player in those 2 games and still come out victorious, and deservedly so, for me, gives me a huge amount of confidence going into tomorrow's game. We've got Kyogo hitting a bit of form, O'Reilly. I know his form's dipped a little bit, but only because he was so good previously, and he's still making a good contribution. He's involved at the weekend. McGregor, man of the match by a country mile. I thought it was interesting listening to Coman's comments today that, he was dismissive of McGregor's performance in the last game, which is just incredible that he should suggest that. And Hatate and CCV, for me, I mean, it doesn't matter what team you are in the world, maybe with the exception of the very, very best teams in Man City, etc., where they can replace top players, but to take your best 2 players out of a team, it's going to have a massive impact. To get them back in, it's going to have a massive impact. And for me, that's what's given me an incredible amount of confidence going into this game, that we've got Carter-Vickers at the back, Hatate in the middle, hopefully alongside McGregor. And I don't really see a weakness in the team. Some would suggest Scales is a potential weakness alongside Taylor. But defensively, having CCV in there alongside Scales will make a huge difference to Scales' performance. And Hatate, O'Reilly and McGregor massively excites me with the work rate of Maeda out wide, and then what Kuhn brings to the game, and an informed Kyogo up front. I think if that's our starting 11, we can be really confident going into that game. I mean, Kyogo's contribution to the game, to this particular fixture, 11 games, 9 starts, 7 goals. I mean, this is a guy who enjoys that fixture, and as we well know, this fixture isn't for everybody. There's been players who played in this fixture for Celtic and for Rangers who've really, really struggled to perform. The obvious one would be Morelos. Really, really struggled to score goals, and Celtic offered players as well that have gone hiding in these fixtures. But Kyogo's one that steps up. O'Reilly, Hatate, McGregor. Just look at that team. You think Maeda will give us, everything that he's got, and the work rate, the 4 at the back with the expertise and the technical ability of Carter-Vickers. I think we're in a really, really good place.
Chris, thinking back to that last trip to Ibrox, you rightly say that Callum McGregor was so influential in the first half an hour of the game. It was surprising, though, the way Rangers went about that game. They did have a goal ruled out in the first minute or 2 for offside, but they did sort of stand off us, and they looked unsure about when to come in presses, and that just allowed McGregor to dictate the game. You would think that won't be their approach on Sunday. You would expect them to be aggressive as you would any team at home in a derby. Obviously, they've got the full crowd behind them as well. So if they are going to come out and try and get at us, how do you think we are set to cope with that, and how can we play through it?
We have to play through it by trusting in what Brendan Rodgers has excelled at for the majority of his 2 spells at Celtic. Look, there's no getting away from our form this year at times has been indifferent. some of it driven by personnel not being available. You can't deny that that's a factor in your form. And also just maybe not having as strong a team on paper. Like there are a few players that have left that were very influential under Ange, right? Abada being one, Jota being another. Talk about big game players that Martin was referring to who haven't done well in this fixture. Jota was a Derby player, fantastic in the fixture. But just being confident and the speed in which we move the ball and have those rotations are going to be key, right? Carter-Vickers is absolutely central to that in terms of building from the back. And whether it's McGregor or Hatate taking the ball under pressure, I trust those players and they need to trust themselves. And I think if we do that, we stand an excellent chance of being able to cause Rangers lots of problems. Like everyone talks about our issues potentially at the back, right? But I don't think Rangers shine themselves in any glory with Goldson at the back there. And I think Kyogo, if he's running off his shoulder, can have an absolute field day. But what's going to be really important is when we get the ball in those wide areas, Maida and Kuhn have to be aggressive in taking on their man. Maida's contribution off the ball, as we all know in these fixtures, and his ability to hopefully keep Tavernier quiet will be extremely important from the defensive side of how Brendan sets the team up. But when we get the ball, it's got to be looking for those runs in the channel. If Kyogo is going to make those runs, we have to be ready to make those passes. And, and if Rangers cheat with a high line and at any time in the game, we need to be looking for Kyogo running off that shoulder. And if he's getting a one-on-one, I like his chances to bury the ball because he's just a proven goal scorer. And Martin mentioned his stats, but what's actually even more remarkable is I don't believe he scored in the first 4 times he played Rangers. Like there were multiple fixtures. And then since then, I think he's had 3 doubles and he scored the goal at Ibrox. And then at the time, a goal Clement called a world-class finish, but then dismissed it today in his press conference, which I found to be quite arrogant. But it's just if he's on the park, he can score a goal out of absolutely nothing. And as often is the case in these fixtures, it can be a tiny mistake that results in the ball ending up in the back of your net or a piece of world-class brilliance. And he has the ability to punish both.
He does, and I think just in those last 6 or 7 games against Rangers, his goal-scoring record is absolutely phenomenal. You touched on the Rangers' defence there, and there's absolutely no 2 ways about the turnaround in form that Rangers have had. They have got better. They've built positive momentum, and actually, if you go back 3 or 4 weeks, there's a period before that where I was looking at it and thinking they're not really conceding very many goals. They're not conceding that many chances in some games that I'd watched them in. But I think in the last 3 or 4 weeks, they obviously had that defeat at Ibrox, where they lost 2-1 to Motherwell. And even like the game last week, Hibs get back level. So you're starting to see that teams are getting goals against them again. And that's encouraging for us because we know that we can do that on any given day. And I think that is encouraging for us getting into this game. And to touch again on Hatate, Martin, in terms of trying to play under pressure, I had a look at some of the stats, obviously, and I think Hatate's played the equivalent of 5 league games this season. If you add up all his minutes across the season, he's played 5 games, never been dispossessed. I know that's a really small sample size, but I think it's a nod towards how well he protects the ball, receives it on the half-turn, protects it, can progress it. His passing range is really good, and I think he's going to be key for us if we do have to play through some Rangers pressure.
I mean, I've called it Carter-Vickers. He's probably the fans' favourite number 1 choice, but probably for me, I would go with Hatate. Just so much admiration for his everything that he brings. He's such a clever player, so hard working. His forward distribution, his defensive play, just his reading of the game. He's a sensational player. I'm so happy that he's back. And I do genuinely believe that between him and Carter-Vickers, they will be the game changers at the weekend. And and they'll make a huge difference. But some of the stats we talked about earlier on, with Rangers winning 1 in the last 9, that of course was the 3-0 defeat, and on that day we played Kobayashi, Ralston, Burnaby, and O. You know, so and it was a nothing game, wasn't it? The league was done. So if you were to discount that, some might say it suits us to do that, but you know, justifiably so. Then they haven't beaten us in the last. Well, that would be 8 games, wouldn't it? And I think looking a bit further back than that, we've only won 2 in the last 12. So, and then of course there's a Brendan Rodgers stats about his 80% win rate, which is really 1 defeat in, I think is it 15 games, something like that. So you know, you've got a manager who knows how to win this fixture. They've got the best personnel we could possibly put on the park. I mean, with regards to our form this season, I couldn't agree more. I think it was Chris said earlier on, it's been indifferent. But Hatate's played 9 league games. Carter-Vickers has only played 19, so he's been missing for a third of the season, and Hatate's been missing for a lengthy period. We've struggled really to find that second winger and that third person in midfield. We've changed the personnel so often, and in actual fact, we're starting to find some good options for that third position in midfield. But we've now got Coonan there and Hatate coming back, so you know those concerns are historic. And for the remainder of the season, not just for this game, we can be really optimistic, you know, about the remaining 7 league games, the semi-final, and you know, if we do get through the semi-final, the final as well. But Hatate has to be, you know, the standout for me, and him going in that midfield. You talked about what we'll do if they play the high press. I think, you know, we hit them on the break quickly with the pace in Maeda, with the clever runs at Kyogo, and the technical ability in the midfield with O'Reilly and Hatate being able to play up, you know, that magical pass, that perfectly weighted pass. We just hit them on the break time and time again, and that then sets them on the back foot and they start to think twice about playing the high press, because I think when the fans behind them, that will be ultimately their tactic. But we just need to make sure that we retain possession of the ball where we can, and we hit them on the break. And I've got a feeling that we will score from hitting them on the break. And you know, there's a good chance we'll lose a goal. You talked earlier, Paul, about Rangers not losing a lot of goals. I think year to date, they're in the league, certainly they're 8 goals and they're 7 and we're 8. There's not a huge difference, but it does feel like we have been losing a lot of goals. So I wouldn't be surprised if we concede, and therefore we'll need to get 1 to draw, 2 to win. That's my gut feeling with regards to how the game will go.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if we concede at all. That clean sheet at Livingston was the first one in, I think, 7 or 8 games. So defensively, we have been vulnerable at times, Chris. And I suppose that brings us on to thinking about who are the chief threats for Rangers and how do we stop them. I think there's obviously one player that stands out for everybody else. James Tavernier's obviously front and centre of everything Rangers do creatively. Who else do you see as threats in the Rangers team for us on Sunday? Don't say John Beaton.
I won't say John Beaton. I mean, look, can't argue with Tavernier's record in this derby, but a number of those goals have come from either the penalty spot or they've come from worldly free kicks. Like, let's just be honest. Like, they've scored once in the 2 games against us this year. They haven't scored from open play. Have they created chances? Absolutely. I wouldn't sit here and pretend, otherwise. I mean, it's going to be very interesting. I know Sima played a short amount. He has looked dangerous for them. Just based on Clement's commentary, I suspect he may start the game, but may only last the 60 minutes, which you could probably say is probably true about Hatate. McGregor, for me, the number of weeks off actually may be beneficial for him, just given the amount of games he's played. He hasn't trained as much, so if he's 80-85%, how far can that take you through? But Rangers have also got some other injury concerns. So whether or not they're fielding their strongest 11, but Sima has certainly been a player that could do damage. So he would be certainly a main threat. But their attempts, I think, to your point earlier, Paul, will be a lot about potentially the long ball or the high ball or looking for the channels. So the back 4 are going to have to be very, very switched on. And if they are going to be playing the high press, we have to be prepared for potential counterattacks ourselves. So That's going to be absolutely crucial. But yeah, I think if we can keep number 2 off the score sheet, either from the penalty spot or free kicks, then that bodes pretty well for us.
Martin, I mentioned John Beaton's name in jest there. I feel like it's a big enough talking point coming into this game, given how the last few weeks have went. With Brendan Rodgers' comments about the game at Hearts, where John Beaton was VAR. Who had money on John Beaton being given this game? It was absolutely guaranteed, wasn't it? Listen, if he does his job properly, we shouldn't be talking about him after the game. But do you see that as a bit of a slap in the face that he was given it after the? I mean, I think Rangers made that complaint about Willie Collum after the last derby, and he hasn't refereed them again in the league since.
But he's on VAR.
I think
Willie Collum's on VAR this weekend.
Nick Walsh has been mentioned as well. Is he involved in the VAR? I'm not sure. I've not looked closely enough.
Collum's name on the breakdown, but I might be wrong.
I could be wrong too. But
yeah, I thought I've seen Nick Walsh mentioned that he's involved in some of the officiating in some capacity. Am I surprised, Paul? I'm not surprised. I feel like I've grown up my whole life listening to this sort of chat, and absolutely with some foundation, but with a degree of paranoia as well, undoubtedly, right? Because it's gone on for so long, so it's a bit like talking about the weather. Talk about referees, or people like Willie Young, Hugh Dallas, Bobby Madden. The list is quite lengthy, and there is inevitably some who would favour Celtic. If you were to ask me to predict what I thought the ratio was, I would probably predict the ratio be four referees that have a soft spot for Rangers and maybe one for Celtic. But that's obviously a guess without any exact science to back it up. So I think that's been a bit of an Achilles heel for us for certainly throughout my life, and I'm sure long before I was here. And the challenge goes on, and I'm not going to let it upset me with regards to that decision. That it surprised me. No, it didn't. I think Beaton was referee at Ibrox and Tuol, and he will have been involved in a lot of these games as well because he is one of the top referees. I thought it was interesting listening to both managers today when they were both asked the question, which was inevitable. And Brendan Rodgers, and I don't say this with the green tinted glasses on. I genuinely believe it. Brendan Rodgers carries himself very, very well with the way he speaks about the opposition, his own club. He's just consummate professional, says all the right things, uses the right tone, he's respectful, versus more often than not, the Rangers managers behave in a different way. And I was really disappointed with Clements today. Just some of his comments I thought were unnecessary. So he talked about the referee as well, and he said, obviously aimed at us. We shouldn't be moaning about decisions made in 1993 and 2008. That means that referees are not competent. I don't know where he got those years from, 1993 and 2008, and I don't know why I had to exaggerate the truth to make his point, because I think the complaint has been made about the current referee is a game that took place, a few weeks ago, not years ago. And Brendan Rodgers was good because Brendan Rodgers said, look, I had an issue with that particular game, but generally speaking, John Beaton's a fantastic referee. He's one of the top referees in the game, and therefore he's earned the right to referee that game. And I thought that was a very, very good response. He might feel different privately, but professionally he gave the right answer. And Clement went on to say, the referees are good and they work very hard. And I couldn't help but think back to the reaction from Clement and the whole Rangers camp after the last game, where the whole week was ruined for us because all we heard about was this potential penalty that was in lifetime, and it was for the whole of that week offside. But all we heard about was the referee and the officials and the fact that it was out of order. And yet today we're being told the referees are very good and they work very hard, and we just need to stop complaining about decisions that they make. So I was pleased with Brendan Rodgers' response. I was disappointed but not surprised with the response from the Rangers camp when it came to the referee. Personally, I'm going to try not to think too much about it and not overthink every decision that he makes, and just accept that he'll get some right and he'll get some wrong. And there is a lot of pressure on referees now to get it right more often than not, with VAR and with all the scrutiny from media. I mean, it's far greater than what it was many years ago, where you didn't have goal line technology and all that stuff. So I'm not overly bothered by it, if I'm being honest. The Tavernier thing with regards to him being a threat, a lot of people saying good chance he'll get a penalty. I think he scored 15 goals in the league, and 10 of those have been penalties. So yeah, I mean, he's fantastic free kick against us. Very good at taking penalties, and of course he's got a fantastic goal ratio for this year, but a high percentage of penalties. So, if you were a betting man, you would fancy Rangers to get a penalty and Tavernier to score, just based on what's happened season to date. I'm kind of hoping we're not talking about the referees at the weekend. I think it almost always happens after these games that there is, even if it's a single decision that's considered contentious, like the penalty at Celtic Park, it gets all the attention, doesn't it, rather than the good. I mean, Clement's saying that, I think he described the 2 goals at Celtic Park as being unlucky. Then inferring that potentially they were lucky for us. There were 2 world-class goals, weren't there? And really that's what we should be focusing on after these games, is all the good stuff that's happened, rather than focusing on something that is or not inaccurate. So I'm hoping we're not talking about the referee come the final whistle at the weekend.
Yep, absolutely. So, we've had 2 derby victories already this season, and all we've spoke about is, all the rest of the country has spoke about is the referee after it. I think it's almost inescapable that somehow we'll be talking about the referee after this game. Willie Collum, incidentally, is the 4th official.
Thank you. It is Nick Walsh on VAR. I checked as well, so I was going to correct myself. I can own my mistakes, Paul, unlike other people on the west side of Glasgow.
Aye, we've mentioned a few of them in the last 5 minutes. There you go, 4th official. Anyway, Chris, round us off with how you think the game might play out and how we can get the result that we need. So, and is that, you've mentioned it already, but is that a draw?
I mean, look, how do I think the game needs to play out? I think we need to establish a strong foothold in the game in the first 15-20 minutes. Definitely not conceding early is huge in these fixtures. Not very often does the team that scores first go on to lose. I think it's only happened 2 or 3 times in decades, right, of looking at this fixture. So the first goal is invariably massive. If we can take the crowd out of the game a little bit, and if we can establish some possession and some good chances, they're going to turn on their players. There's just no 2 which ways about it, because that's what happened in the first game. Obviously we scored very close to half time with Kyogo pouncing on a mistake from a Goldson header that was put back through by O'Reilly. But if we can score first, I would definitely feel very optimistic about our chances to go on and win the game. But my gut feeling is it will be a scoring draw, and 1-1 or 2-2 would be my prediction. Last time I said 2-1 Celtic, and I was 100% right. So if that happens again, I'll be in heaven.
We'll take that. Martin, how do you see it going, mate?
So there's a number of factors to these games, isn't there? There's your leader, your captain, your manager, and for me, very little been said about Brendan Rodgers and his stats this week. It's just been big focus on Clement, and what an outstanding manager he is. And I've already given him some recognition on this call, and I wouldn't deny that his early career at Rangers has been good. I just find it surprising that there hasn't been as much chat about Brendan Rodgers and his credentials. And we've heard a lot of that before. The last manager at Rangers was just the brains behind Steven Gerrard's success, and of course that proved to be without foundation. So for me, Brendan Rodgers brings more than Clement. So I'm pleased with who's sitting in the dugout. I think personnel is obviously so important. The manager can only deal the cards that he's got to play with, and made some comparison between our players versus the Rangers players. And I genuinely try not to be biased. And spoke to 1 or 2 others when I was doing this exercise, but I think at least 7 of our players would start in the combined 11. I think at least 7, and primarily our forward 6, our front 6. So I think personnel in the park, we're in a stronger position, managerial stronger position. I think, as Chris has said, it would be good if we could get the first goal, just with the situation with the fans. A couple of things to comment on with the fans. The last 4 games at Ibrox, we've won 1-0, we lost 3-0 in the game. That, these games are always important. I've called it meaningless a couple of times, and I shouldn't, because they're never meaningless. But in a game after the league was decided. We lost 3-0, but the other two were a 2-2 and a 2-1 victory. So we've only had one defeat in the last 4, and it was the least important game of the 4. So, how important will the fans be? You can't deny that it will give them an edge, but I think it's exaggerated. The benefit that they bring, and it hasn't proven to be a success. Locking the fans out at Ibrox, we've performed very, very, very well over the piece. So I think if we can have a good start in the game, avoid going behind, I feel really, really confident. I said earlier on, I think we'll concede, and you round off our start earlier, Paul, about the last time how often we've lost a goal this season. So I think we'll concede, but I think we've got 2 or 3 goals in us. So I wouldn't be surprised if it finished 2-1 or 3-2. I'm not naive enough to think we'll go Ibrox and win comfortably. It'll be a cauldron. Rangers will be right up for it because they'll see it as an opportunity to win the league, and it would be a great achievement if they did win the league. But I generally believe the pressure's on them at home in front of their fans, who will be unforgiving if the game goes against them, because they have been in the past. So my prediction is 2-1, but we'll score more than them.
Let's hope so. Let's hope so. There you go, folks. That's it for the preview show. Like the video and give us your thoughts in the comments below. I'll be back tomorrow with the starting 11 prediction before the game on Sunday. Thanks for joining us.